Welcome to good. Now we're official. Welcome to God at Work for September. Thanks for being here. So I was gonna say, always a different assortment of people. Glad that you guys are here, and now also some other people probably join us delayed as they watch the recording. Today, I'm gonna share my story over the last number of months and about my mental health journey. And I haven't done this yet, really, except for like in, one-on-one kind of thing. So I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to share, especially with it being recorded for posterity. So we'll see how that goes. But also, I just thought, if you're thinking of questions as we go, throw them in the chat because then we can talk about that kind of after I share the story. And also, I'm not sure with those gathered here, but after I share my story and those kind of things, I'd love for any of you to share briefly about resources for mental health or things that have been helpful for you or for others, especially for church workers dealing with mental health challenges. My goals in wanting to share this are number one is just to normalize it. Uh, as much as I want to normalize, I still just get nervous talking about it, and yet it's been part of my story for a very long time. But I think I get nervous because it is not necessarily normal for people to talk about their mental health. If I said, "Hey, I'm gonna share my cancer story," that's a challenging thing for lots of people, but it's rarer for somebody to say, "Hey, I want to tell you my story about anxiety and depression." So I want to normalize it. Also, along the way, I want to share what is helpful from a congregation leadership perspective, because my congregation was very helpful. And then the other thing is for you or other people is to encourage more conversation about our mental health before you hit the wall. Because, it's like mental health is like physical health. I mean, when you hit the wall, usually that's when things have already become, a big, big challenge. So talk about things before you hit the wall. Speaking of that, uh, of hitting the wall, that's what happened to me Christmas Eve, this past 2023, Christmas Eve. For context, I've been in ministry for 24 years now, 14 years in my current congregation. I have a wife and three sons who are now 20, 18, and 17. Um, and I'm a sole pastor with two full-time staff members as ministry staff, but sole pastor. So Christmas Eve, you probably remember, it's one of those weird ones that happens, every 6 years where it's on a Sunday. So Sunday morning, we did kind of a family service and showed the very first Noel with Andy Griffith narrating. I love that, we used that and everything. So it was a nice morning. And I came home and I had already been working up. I mean, my anxiety and my depression were really ramped up for a long time. But Christmas Eve in the middle of the afternoon, before going back to do that full Christmas Eve service, starting to talk to my wife about some things. And I was just, I don't know. I mean, my anxiety was just through the roof. And that's when my wife said, "You need to do something." And I mean, I knew what that meant. My and my what that meant was to take leave and do an outpatient program for depression and anxiety. I knew what that meant because of my history, and I'll explain that for in a little bit. Um, but at that point, I was finally ready to hear it. I think she had probably been trying to figure out how to tell me that for a long time. Um, we, I was thinking, it had been, I don't know, like a rough year-ish, and she can trace it back much further, probably at least 2 years. But I wasn't necessarily seeing how difficult it had gotten. In fact, I had started to feel like I was getting better last fall. Uh, so that was the afternoon, realizing I'm gonna have to take a leave, and then I had to go back and do Christmas Eve service, and then Christmas Day service the next day, and I got through it. It was a challenge, but I did get through it, and then began making some phone calls that week and found a center near us. Fortunately, we're in the Chicago land area, which I think really helps because there's a lot of resources, and ended up at a center in Northbrook, actually where John's at, but the town where John's at, Northbrook, it's called Compass, and they had space, and I was kind of like, okay, well, when can I start? And they're like, well, can you come do an intake tomorrow? So apparently I had explained enough to the intake person on the phone that they were like, we've got space for you. You need to come in tomorrow. And so that's what I did. Uh, um, and in the meantime, also met with one of my elders, told him what was going on, and then we kind of crafted a process for our congregation also. Compass was great. What it ended up being is, if you don't know these terms, so first I was there all day for a partial hospitalization program. And then eventually, after 6 weeks, I went to part-time, which is called the intensive outpatient program. And flash forward, Palm Sunday was my first day back full-time. And what the program entailed was group therapy, which was really psychoeducational, a little bit of talk therapy, but you weren't really sharing a lot because of confidentiality. It was more about learning a lot of different skills and what skills can be helpful. Also had an individual therapist and a psychiatrist who adjusted my medications, and then also a family therapist that helped me and my wife start talking about some of this also. And I can talk more about the center as you have questions and things like that. My history is this. Uh, I probably first could have been diagnosed with depression when I was 13. But that was in 1986, and we weren't necessarily talking about things then. Um, and so I just figured it was the way I was, and just, all people are, thinking such dark thoughts and such anxious thoughts. Uh, Somehow muscled through a lot of things all the way through high school, college, got to the seminary, and for as much as we complained about, I don't even know what they called it then, but the pastoral formation kind of stuff, um, counseling and things, personality tests, things like that, as much as we complained about it, through that process actually is what helped me identify the fact that I had something that was diagnosable, and it was depression and anxiety. Up until that point, I didn't really know that it was a diagnosable thing. And so that was really eye-opening. and something I did a little bit of work on last year of seminary, doing some counseling through the counseling center when um, Ryan Solomon was still there, and then graduated and went to a small city in Wisconsin without a lot of resources, and started ministry, and things are going okay, but I'm trying to learn a lot and things like that. And I don't remember, it's a year or two into it, and realized I needed something. I mean, I was not doing real great. So finally found a counselor locally and started doing some counseling. And that's when I also first started taking medication. And it really had a dramatic effect of really being helpful. And so that just became the new normal. I'm on medication. I go to counseling sometimes, and I'm good. 7 years in that first call, and then moved to the Milwaukee area. And uh, we'll just say it was a crash and burn. I was not I was not the right fit, and it took a toll on me. Uh, I started, I found a counselor, found a psychiatrist, um, but it was becoming increasingly clear that I was having a lot of trouble. Had three little boys at home, was barely having enough energy to do family function kind of stuff, and I'd come home exhausted and worried and wanted to sleep all the time. And so finally, my um, therapist just said, "You need to take a leave. You can't keep doing this." And at that point, I didn't know anything about what a program would be or anything like that. Um, but she was right, and that was the first time I did an outpatient kind of program. Uh, I did that for, I can't remember right now, like about 4 weeks. And it was helpful. Um, and took full leave for about 6 weeks, and then started gradually coming back 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours. I was an associate pastor. Um, so, working with the senior pastor to come back slowly and come back a little bit stronger, um, and got through that. So then we've been here for 14 years, and I've gone through ups and downs and all kinds of things with mental health, but have always managed to have a counselor and a psychiatrist. And but I had gone through a couple of different counselors, just trying to find the right fit after the one I had really worked well with moved, which is a real challenge. Um, and in the process, I was kind of feeling like, you know what, though, I feel like things are getting better. Uh, it was around this time last year that I had said to one of our district uh, staff pastors, like, "Hey, if I had to take leave, would you help the congregation find guest pastors?" And he's like, "Of course." And I asked him that thinking I might have to do this soon. And then I was like, no, you know what? I'm feeling all right. And so I just kept going until, like I said, I hit the wall um, on Christmas Eve. Uh, so I think a big takeaway for me in doing the program this year was that I had a long time ago accepted the fact that um, I was always going to be needing to take medication, antidepressants, probably adjusting those as you go, but always need medication. I had not really thought that about counseling. And so at different times, I kind of felt like, oh, I've come to a close. I feel like I'm in a healthy place. I'm done with counseling. I've graduated from counseling. And I think that probably was one piece of what put me at risk is that I kept trying to graduate from counseling, like achieve something or like prove that I'm better or something. Um, and now after being in program, I've come away realizing I will always need medication and I will always need a counselor. I might not need my counselor as frequently, but I always need to have a counselor that knows me and I know them, so that when things start getting worse, I'm I've got a resource and in place. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in counseling every week. That may slow down, it may not, but thank God for Concordia plans that has helped tremendously with all of that. Um, so that's kind of, the personal side of things. Let me tell you about the congregation side of things. And like I said, if you got questions, throw them in the chat, but and we'll try to talk about those in a little bit. The congregation. So, so the first thing that's been helpful about my current congregation, Bethel, is that because I came here after a crash and burn, and had actually resigned, and they called me anyways from candidate status. Um, I I was very quick to let leaders and staff know that I struggle with depression and anxiety, and that's been part of the journey. And at times that may be something I have to talk to them more about. So all along, different leaders have come and gone, different staff, people have been aware, at least not necessarily the whole congregation, but enough of the leaders and stuff to know it's something that I struggle with. So that was really good to have that in place before this Christmas Eve. After I was convinced by my wife that I needed to do something, then, like I said, I told one elder, and he said, okay, how do you want to do this? And I said, I just want to, I forgot, I had to get through the next weekend. I said, I will do Sunday, was it the 31st or whatever? I'll do the 31st, and then I need to be done. Um, and he agreed to that as long as I was okay with that. And we called a meeting of our governing board, our elders and staff for the Tuesday after New Year's, and just kind of let them know that I need to share some things and uh, that I'd explain more. And so we had that meeting, and I had told the staff ahead of time, but they were there too. And I kind of came in thinking, okay, I maybe a few weeks of this program and then I'll be back. And the elder just kept saying, why don't we just say you're not here until um, no earlier than Ash Wednesday, which was February 14th. And he just kept pressing that. And I kept thinking, I mean, that's 6 weeks. I mean, surely I'm going to be back by then. And he kept just saying, nope, let's just plan that you're not here for 6 weeks. So I kind of accepted that. And I also came to that meeting with the staff and leaders like, okay, how can I help? Let's do some brainstorming about guest pastors. What do you need me to coordinate on? How do you need me to, I don't know, write Bible study? I mean, I had all these ideas of like all the things they were going to need me to do. And mostly, aside from telling them what I was doing, giving them a list of the very few guest pastors that I knew might be able to help. After that, within a half hour, the elder just said, okay, thanks, go home. And I was like, wait, what? Like, are you sure? Like I feel like, there's more we can work on. He's like, no, we got it. You got to go home. And so I went home, and that spoke volumes to me uh, that they said that. Now I know afterwards they were all like, okay, how are we doing this? And having to divide up responsibilities and figuring out all of that. But in that moment, they were just like, yep, you go home. And they kind of, you know, protected me from from all the different things they were going to have to scramble to figure out. They just sent me home, which was amazing. I did help craft a message that got emailed out to the congregation to explain what happened. We also did clarify that I would provide updates through the elder, so that they knew they would all get a few updates, but they weren't expecting that I was going to reach out to all of them, and all of them weren't going to reach out to me, which was great to figure that out. The other really amazing thing, and I don't know how you prepare a congregation for this, but the other amazing thing was how much they respected my privacy. Um, I live in the parsonage, across the parking lot. Um, my happy space is my space that I'm in right now, which is the garage on the front of the house. So I'm pretty visible, although this was January. But um, we're right here. And I got a couple of cards just saying, we're praying for you. And other than that, no one tried to break that respect my privacy thing. It was really amazing and loving. I saw some people out in public, and they, were cordial, but they didn't try to press or anything like that, which was amazing. In fact, I look back and I can say that the only person who really asked the inappropriate questions was a woman. She was a computer tech that came to my house to fix my laptop. But she first went to the church thinking that's what the address was. And they said, oh, no, he's at home. And I don't know if they had sort of said he's at home, he's on leave or something like that. So she gets over to my house and she's like, oh, they told me you're on your leave. What's going on? And I'm thinking, lady, you're here to work on my computer, and I'm not going to be an asshole to you, but whoops, that's on recording. I'm not going to be mean to you, but like, I'm not telling you what's going on. I, and so I just said, I just, some stuff going on. Thanks for coming to fix the computer. But she was the only person who tried to break through that, which was, like I said, I don't know how you train a congregation to do that, but it was amazing. Um, we did a couple of times send out kind of mid-process updates that I helped craft, and then the staff sent it out with elders' approval and stuff. But just kind of giving a little bit of update, especially because then we did get to Ash Wednesday, and I said, why don't I come back um, uh, part-time, half-time, and I was doing half-time program. And so I wanted people to know ahead of time that that was happening, what was going on, and both in that one and then the final message about what was happening, we also gave people some language, like, um, when you see pastor, what do you say? Um, you say, hey, glad to see you, praying for you, and you leave it at that. So we kind of coached people on how to talk about it, because one of my fears was what I got in my previous congregation when I took leave. And when I came back was I got a lot of people asking all of the inappropriate questions, like the computer lady. What's going on? Like, why are you, why haven't you been here? And things like that. It was a little different because I really wasn't very Uh, I did not tell the congregation much about why I took leave, but everybody's really trying to press through and just ask a lot of invasive questions. So I was really afraid of that. And so then to have Bethel not do that um, was was really amazing. Um, so that was great. One other thing I would just say is what helped too was that uh, I had a friend who doesn't have a current call, but is on the um, roster, and he had helped a couple of times. And then I asked him, "Could you preach the first Sunday I'm back, and I'll just focus on leading service?" And that was really helpful too. Like I could just do liturgy, greet people, be there for the first time in a long time, and he preached and he led Bible study, and that was a nice way to ease into things. As far as district support, district was great. They helped the congregation find guest pastors, and that took a little hunting in our neck of the woods. And they took turns checking on me, different people from staff. So I'm very thankful to the district. Came back, like I said, Palm Sunday full time. And since then, I mean, the big things have been to practice the skills I've been learning. That was kind of my line is if somebody wanted to ask that question, well, are you better? And if you know much about mental health, you know, there's not like a cure or better. It just doesn't make it doesn't compute sometimes. And so I said, my main answer is mental health is a journey, a daily journey, and I've learned a lot of skills, and I'm going to need to keep practicing the skills. And that's kind of my line. And then the other things that keep me healthy is counseling, medication, being outside as much as possible, because that's my space. I do art, which has really been amazing to help me through things. I'm working less in some respects, or at least giving myself space to zone out when I was supposed to be working and zone out because I thought I was reading about my sermon, but now I'm just staring at a tree. That's okay sometimes. And I'm leaning on others, cultivating some friendships because I kind of lets friendship kind of dry up over space. And then family time, making family time and time with my wife. And those are the things that are keeping me healthy. So that's my little bit of a journey. And I see a couple of questions or comments or whatever. So we address those, but if you've got other questions, I'd love for you to chime in too. But Jay, uh, it's as someone who may not wrestle with anxiety, can you paint a picture of what that feels like or looks like? Yeah, it's a good question, Jay. For me, it had depression and anxiety are usually twins. They go together. But for me, depression had always been the more presenting thing, which was, you know, a lack of drive, a real sense of like just always feeling terrible about myself. My inner, you would never speak to another human being the way I speak to myself, that kind of stuff. And just a feeling like uh, I'm awful and everybody else is good. That's the depression. The anxiety really, I think, slowly built after COVID and some other challenges in the congregation. And I took on a hypervigilance. We lost about 50 people in the course of a fall, like the, you know, autumn. And every time the phone was ringing, I just was becoming more and more hypervigilant. And I think I just stayed in that mode. So flight or fight. Either I felt all the time like I just wanted to run away from things, or I wanted to push back in some things. But mostly for me, it's flight, not so much fight. Um, or freeze is another thing. I just, uh, like I said, it's okay for me to stare at a tree for a while now, but a year ago, staring at a tree, I could just sit and really just feel anxious and worry about things for an hour and just stare at a tree. And so it was like this freeze, like I just couldn't figure out what to do next. And I was scared about what was around the corner. What were they going to say? What were they thinking? And so it just became more and more. And then like through the roof, that the feeling is almost electric. Like just the thoughts are flying and you can't even hear when somebody says like, hey, that's not happening or that's not a problem. You can't even hear it. I wasn't having a full-blown panic attack, but um, I can sort of imagine what that might be like just because it was so electric. I don't know if that helps, Jay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Ben.
Sure, sure. Um, and then Chris, I wonder if there's a good resources out there for congregations to help them mitigate, prepare for a situation. I'd love to know if somebody else out there um, knows some things. I haven't quite figured out. I kind of want to look back and try to think like, what are the things that we may or may not have been doing um, that helped with this? Um, but I haven't really identified that yet. We do have one resource that I know is in quite a few communities now, but mental health first aid. Uh, Ours is led by our county health department, and it's a 1 day training, and it's really like it sounds like you get the very nuts and bolts of mental health and how to help somebody when they're going through a mental health challenge. And it's meant as first aid, like, you know, put something on that thing and stop it bleeding and get them to the professional kind of thing. And we're trying to help more of our people consider going through that because it does give you just a very basic background, which is great. Let's come back to resources. Travis, oh yeah, good question about Susan and the boys. And I'm not telling so much about their story because that's their story to tell, but um, uh, just say that they they kept choosing over the course of that what they needed and where they needed to be, how they wanted to be involved or not involved, and at times um, I needed to keep um, allowing that, like not get involved in trying to tell them what they should be doing. Um, that's my anxiety speaking, like, oh my gosh, if you don't go and it's really going to be bad or something. But I realized later, like, hey, they needed space too, and they needed to work through some of this. And so giving them support was also helpful. For me, I ended up well, whatever. It's being recorded, right? But I mean, I ended up attending mostly um, non-Missouri Synod congregations, just to be someplace. Mostly a friend of mine, pastor friend of mine with a mission church near us, to be in some kind of space. But I had too many different connections with Synod congregations that I just needed to be in a place where I could be um, pretty much anonymous. And so that's what I was doing. Other questions and or share a good resource that you know. Let me stop spotlighting too. Mark, do you want to say something about Canyon?
Yeah. Um, I'll talk in my ministry. I came into a congregation 22 years ago, which was in conflict. And I was in a church where I was younger and I could just, deal with all the stress and then we had three boys, about the same age as your boys, really quick. And the brain power it takes when as you get older, it sort of sneaks up on you, right? In the meantime, after getting through the conflict, we were up to like 320 funerals in a decade, and the toll that takes. Um, so Ambassador Reconciliation was great in helping me with the resources, the skills to deal with conflict. Um, and Ed Kyneth, Ted Kober have been incredible. I guess I didn't understand the wear and tear of 20 some years and needed a break. And Shepherd's Canyon was that last fall. Um, it was a scary thing to go through because I didn't feel like it was really needed it. But once I got out there, was able to, um, I think, just sort of decompress is the word I'd use. I don't, I went to counseling with um, over 300 funerals. Um, and I don't think I ever had depression. People ask me questions about stuff like that. But I did have a full-blown anxiety attack in front of the congregation. That was scary. Um, I had a seizure before that, and nobody knew what it was because I didn't have a grand mal seizure. Long story short, um, it was stress and lack of sleep. And I thought I was sleeping fine. But apparently my brain wasn't shutting down. They did a sleep study on me. And then being able to just, that's what I focus on. So I focus on, and I ask people, how's your sleep? How's
Mhm.
your sleep? Because if I get sleep, I can filter things so much better. The day I had the anxiety attack, I was not preaching. Um, I worked the whole week. I was stressed out. I did not sleep a wink. In fact, I slept on the couch because I didn't want to keep my wife up. And then just laid on the couch. Remember the sun coming up, and I just drank a whole pot of coffee. And then it didn't eat breakfast, and then walked into 16 different messages and announcements to make and prayer requests and uh, and I got up to read the epistle lesson, and all I saw was my associate and my wife. I couldn't read. So I took a week off and worked on exercise and uh and processed stuff and I'm very open about it. I don't care what people think. So I think the big thing is being vulnerable and allowing people to know. I talked to a number of emergency first responders, former military, doctors, nurses since COVID, people who've been through a lot of stuff and just the stress of the wear and tear. It doesn't matter what the reason is, whether you had a bad childhood or you went through trauma or it just sort of this wear and tear that just sort of creeps up on you. I think, hitting the wall is a good thing. There were times where I'd come into church and I would be hyperventilating.
Mm.
And, I have a great congregation. I mean, these people are amazing, how they take care of you. So that wasn't a problem. It just was like the brain wasn't shutting down, you know. And you go home and you got three boys who are going through puberty at the time. Brain didn't shut down, you know. And so I thank you for. I was not expecting to. I just want to share resources. So Shepherd's Canyon is amazing, and Phil's on. It was on, so I would highly recommend that. And just the encouragement to get good sleep and exercise and process with somebody with whatever you're feeling and thinking. So
Thank you, Mark. Other
Can
people,
can I
others?
jump in for a moment?
Yes, please.
Just to introduce myself, I'm sort of this stranger in your midst. Mark sent me the Zoom invite, so here I am. Phil Lee, the Counseling Care Director at Shepherd's Canyon Retreat. A brother in Christ, retired NALC pastor, and a therapist. So I help coordinate all of the retreats at Shepherd's Canyon Retreat. I do client assessments, client intakes, and I also, about 3 or 4 times a year, I live in Seattle, and about 3 or 4 times a year travel to the retreat center to help facilitate a retreat, as I will be doing in 2 weeks. So I just wanted to let you know who I am. Who is this guy who jumped in? I'm not part of the LCMS system, though, having been the counseling care director at Shepherd's Canyon, I've worked with a lot of LCMS folks and have gotten to know your system fairly well. And I must say, and I want you guys to hear this, I've been very impressed as an institution how the LCMS has stepped up and really helped support at least those of us who are involved in the Shepherd's Canyon Retreat Ministry. Is very impressive. There's always the question of confidentiality, which leads me simply to say this, and then I'll be done. If, as a resource, I'll offer myself. If anybody wants to have a conversation with me, completely confidential, I don't talk to anybody about you, collectively speaking. If you call me, it's confidential, period, no exceptions. So I will personally offer myself as a resource if you just want to have a conversation, if you want to explore further about Shepherd's Canyon or other possibilities, there I am. So I'll just leave it at that.
Phil, would you just give a brief description? Is it always set retreat times, kind of like a cohort, or I'm an individual, I'm really struggling, can I get in there next Wednesday?
Yeah. Good question. We have 1 retreat a month, give or take. And sometimes if our retreats fill up, then we'll try to find space to add a second retreat, as we did this coming October. So the easiest way to find out when a retreat is to look on our website. They're listed there, actually into 2025. So they're not at a set time, basically 1 week a month. Except for December. We found that December wasn't working well for obvious reasons. So we have at least 11 retreats a year.
Okay.
And then we try to make space to add if we can and if it's necessary.
Yeah.
So check the website or contact me if you want to know about other possibilities. I am not an arm twister. I'm not going to try to twist your arm to come to a retreat, that kind of thing. That doesn't do good.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. So I play things pretty close to the vest myself. I get that. I understand how that goes. I was 4 decades in parish ministry. So I have some sense of what guys are challenged with. And in my history, what men and women are challenged with. Shepherd's Canyon Retreat is not just for clergy, it's for people in ministry, so-called professional church workers. Not sure I like that term, but I don't know what else to go with. So, and we are ecumenical. We work with folks across the spectrum, if you will, of denominations, which makes for some interesting situations. So I don't want to take too much time, but I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. John Chalberg, is there anything we as parishioners should stop doing that adds to pastors' stress and depression? Why?
I know there's probably a ton of things, but is there a common thing that pastors talk about when they're together that, my parishioners do this and that all, like I said, I know it's a tough question, but we're vacant right now, and I'm not at your level, but I feel the pressure, and because everybody just comes to you, and I think that we as parishioners think you are there. And then I learned from John Nunes once that when a pastor is troubled, who does he go to?
Mhm.
Goes to other pastors, and you just hear the answers that you would give to a parishioner. And that hit me hard, that,
Yeah.
it's a tough life on you guys. I mean, you take not only your problems, but everyone else's problems. Like,
Yeah.
he
Thanks,
said,
man.
300 funerals. I mean,
Yeah.
I helped with one, and it was enough. So bless you guys for what you do and what you put up with. And if you can think of anything that, hey, stop doing this, and maybe I can share it at our church, that we're doing this and we're just adding to their stress. So I'll hush.
Rick, you're unmuted, and you are qualified to answer that question, maybe.
Yeah, I thought I'd maybe just give a simple, straightforward answer. I tell students I hope they all end up having a Jerry Smith in their congregation. I just did, Jerry Smith was a parishioner of mine 20 years ago when I was in the parish, and he was one of my elders. He would stop into my office about once every 4 months and just flop himself down and say, "Pastor, how are you doing?" And it was just that direct little, knowing that one of my elders, and I would say maybe boards of elders should identify one or two of the elders to go and do that sort of thing every 2, 3, 4 months, maybe more often in some situations if the pastor's under stress and is known to be under stress. But having somebody to check in, how are you doing, to represent the congregation in a way that says, hey, we are caring for you. What can we do for you? What do we need to stop doing? Because it's going to be different in each one of the congregations, I think, that pastors serve in, and different personalities, because what you do for a introvert pastor is going to be different than what you do for an extrovert pastor, and so on down the personality line. Thank you, Phil Lee, for being here as well. So I just did Jerry's funeral 6 months ago. He put it into his wallet and said, "Please ask Pastor Mars to come back and do my funeral." And I just happened to be going to Kansas that week anyway, so I was able to do his funeral, and just did his wife's funeral just a few weeks ago, because I happened to be in Kansas at the same time. And it's not a good practice for seminary professors to go back and do funerals for previous congregation members, but it was an exception here because, again, Jerry was just like family, and he spent a lot of time with me and my family in 4-H and all kinds of other things. He was my age now. 20 years ago, he had just retired from his job, so he threw a lot of himself into church work and so forth. But I really appreciated that he cared for me and my family. So yeah, be a Jerry Smith, JC, I would say, or make sure that there is a Jerry Smith in your congregation to care for your pastor. So,
Great. Thanks, Rick.
yeah. Sorry, I missed earlier where we got theological symposium going on here. I'll go back and listen to what you said later.
All right. Just have a few more minutes, but anybody else have either a resource you wanted to share, something that's been helpful to you, or question?
I would just toss in there something real quick. Culture of criticism is a huge problem in the church at large, across denominations. Culture of criticism, and boy, it's sneaky stuff. And I just, I that eats away at so many pastors. If there's a developing culture of criticism within a congregation, it's insidious stuff. It's like cancer. It's terrible. And we're all vulnerable to that, for one thing or another. But I just would throw that out there to guard against a culture of criticism. The other piece, I guess you could say it's related, but I have observed, including myself, when I feel stressed or anxious, my listening skills really really are diminished. And I've noticed through the years, including myself, a lot of pastors need a lot of work in listening, really active listening. And of course, we need to be heard, and we have the privilege of being heard as preachers quite a bit, but that's very different than the personal nature of speaking and listening and being vulnerable for people. So culture of criticism, active listening, those are two that I just want to throw out there in terms of the culture of a congregation that can really do a lot of damage or really do a lot of good.
Thanks, Bill. Hey, Garrett, I was going to say that's awesome. The head elder solely I think you meant responsible, not reasonable, for the pastor and his well-being. That's foresight.
Not my church, just I did a summer vicarage there.
Oh, I got him confused. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
But that's
but-
really great. That's really great.
Yeah.
Last couple things I would just say is 16 years ago, I also did doxology, the classic doxology. And that was incredibly helpful to me. So that's a resource. There are a ton of resources out there. But also just encourage you to be just asking questions of fellow pastors, like how are they doing? And following up with that a little bit. And then the last thing I'll say is that's probably not the last thing, but it's the last thing I'll say. Because I forgot in my story is the first time I went into program 16 years ago and now a huge difference was the program here was light years ahead of the other one. But I also realized 16 years ago, I too quickly let my fellow patients know that I was a pastor. And pretty quickly, that meant I was caring for them. And I was in a place where I wasn't really able to be caring for people. And two, that's not my job there. And so when I went this time, I was determined not to let anyone know that I was a pastor. My individual therapist, my psychiatrist and family therapist, they all knew because I could share that privately in a room. The group therapist never knew until the day I left, and I said it in a note. But it kept me from falling into what we normally do is we care for people and focused on just taking care of myself, which was great. It's also meant that I had to really trust God. I mean, always need to trust God, but here was the really difficult thing. I did sort of get to know some people. There's a lot of people in different group rooms and you move around and stuff, but I did sort of get to know people, but not really. But then either when they finished the program or when I finished the program, that was it. You didn't know anything else about them. You weren't going to contact them. That's the rules. And it was a real strong sense of like, oh, this is what it means to trust people into God's hands, because there was nothing I could do anymore for so and so, because I will never talk to her again probably. And so it was really just like, okay, this is what it means. God, you're in charge. I can't do anything about it. And it's probably good for my pastoral health too. So thank you all for listening. Thanks for being here. Next day or two, I'll get the recording out. Maybe I'll bleep myself. I don't know. But I'll get the recording out, and hopefully the conversation can be helpful to others. If any of you are just getting you thinking about some things, and you got more questions or whatever, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And either we'll talk about it or I'll say, gosh, that sounds like a lot. Let's get you connected to someone else, but be glad to help. So with that, thank you for being here for this month's God at Work.